see if I can get Sam's attention. Hey, Sam. Hey, no, you're fine, Sam. But just in case you hear squeals and everything, if you'll be prepared to jump in. No, you don't have to sit over there, but I think we got it set. Okay, I think we're good. The other thing we added is we put a mic on the television. It's number 7.
Oh, good.
Okay.
That could be exciting.
That could be exciting. Well, thank you very much for being here. As I said earlier in the day, we're here because of Don Gallagher. Everybody is here because of Don Gallagher. And being able to give a tour that I've done lots of times already with Don Gallagher in the audience to add commentary was like a super experience. It was wonderful. I was taking mental notes because I'm going to use it next time I give tours. But that was really special. So this afternoon, we're going to start off with David Tipton and Steve Kerr. Even though I understand, Steve, you're going to be more the side man. Yeah. we're going to kick it to David. I want to say a couple of things about these guys before I hand it off to them. When the announcement was made that we were reopening Gallagher, I got a lot of support and encouragement. Now, you might be surprised that sometimes things can be negative online. And so there was some chatter going on. Who are you? You're not a Gallagher. Which I already felt self-conscious about that anyway, so that just made it worse. Here we go. And David Tipton reached out to me and had a brief discussion with me about various things, including Gallagher's been about a team. It's not just one person. Now, I say that no disrespect to Don, who ran the company for 40 years. 40 years. From 75 to 2015. I haven't made it 4 years yet, and I'm wondering about it. How did you do it? No. Yeah, persistence. Yeah. So lots of respect. But David reached out to me and was very supportive. Then they came up here together to check things out. Of course, right? They wanted to see for themselves. And I'll tell you, they gave a real vote of confidence, including Steve went home with a new Gallagher. And then David and I are in discussions about designing a guitar as well. So I appreciate you guys, appreciate your support. I would also think it'd be helpful for you to say a little something about your personal connection to Gallagher, but we're going to hand it off to you to talk about some history. Okay?
There we go. Am I good? We're thrilled to be here. Honored to be here among friends. It's not a lot of respect to Don, but to Gene as well. Thank you so much. I've got to see 2 of my absolute guitar heroes already today. I walk in and see Steve Kaufman and get to see Jim Hurst, and I feel right at home here. So thank you guys. We're going to go right into it because there's 1,000 stories I could tell. I got time for about 100, and Steve's the one that's going to try to keep me on track. And he's what was I just talking about? He's my man to do that. So when did it all start? When did all this wonderful things start? Depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about J.W. Gallagher and Son, well, 1915. That's when J.W. Gallagher was born. If you want to know when the first instrument built, that would be about 1927. Because believe it or not, J.W. Gallagher, I guess, with a pocket knife and an axe or something, made a violin. I mean, how do you do that? I would suspect that may be a chord top, maybe more difficult than a standard guitar. I don't know, but I would think so. The correct answer to the question, multiple choice, would be 1939, because that was when J.W. Don's dad opened a cabinet shop, a woodworking shop, known now for the incredible furniture that he made. And there was a lot of different things he would make, because he could make anything. But there are 4-poster beds around, and I've been blessed to see some of them with 8-foot posts on them, turned beautifully. where you go past artisanship and go to art. Now, I'm going to zip backwards just a little bit. I said 1927, 12-year-old J.W. was amazing enough to actually be building instruments for fun out in the middle of nowhere. It's astounding. 2 years later, age 14, his dad died suddenly. And J.W. Gallagher at age 14 was faced with having to go to work, drop out of school, survive, and this was 1929, 6 months into the Great Depression. Now, how would folks in this room handle that? I suspect I wouldn't have been handled as well as J.W. did, because within 10 years of that time frame, 29 and 39, he'd not only become a master carpenter, he'd become a master woodworker, and those are two really kind of different things. It's an astounding thing. So J.W. opens up a woodworking shop. He has the skills to be able to do that. And guess what? He'd been doing it for several years, 1942, and he got drafted. And it all just whacked. Well, we're going to mess with your life again, J.W. here. So J.W., I have to say, one of my favorite parts of the book is J.W.'s military experience. Don and I figured this out as we were going. We were literally learning as we went, because he managed to find discharge papers and just enough information to get dates and times. J.W., I can't tell all of those stories, but there's a couple that I do have to tell, because it'll set the tone. You got to know where all this came from. J.W., when we know that when he was inducted into the Army Air Force, Army Air Corps, that he was, all they knew about him when he showed up was 5 feet 10, 175 pounds, and a 7th grade education. Now that sounds like an infantry man to me. And they did all the screening, testing, you know, how smart are you going? And he did so well on the mechanical aptitude screen that they suspected he might have been cheating. And so they brought him back in, monitored him taking the test, and he scored a perfect score, which infuriated him. You know, as you can imagine, how in the world did you do this? And the answer was real simple. It was like, you gave me the same test again. I'd already had time to figure out the answer. Now, a bunch of great stories here, but because of that skill, he ended up being trained as an airplane mechanic, which paid off for him for the rest of his life, because you know, he would go work in the shop for 10 or 12 hours and then take a break by going out in the garage and getting sweaty playing with grease and putting the Mercedes together. That's the kind of person J.W. was. So where was it? Oh, yeah. So he got trained as an airplane pilot, got sent to Garden City, Kansas, to a place where there weren't no airplanes for him to work on, and there wasn't even a base. And so, but that was by design. The Air Force is pretty smart. They got this master carpenter, gave him 14 men and a sergeant rank in almost no time at all, and he helped build the base, and then went for the rest of his tour work. And during that 4 years, almost 4 years, he was in the military. He did manage to marry Hazel and have a little boy, Don's older brother, William Bill Billy, depending on how well you knew him. We both had the pleasure of meeting him. And he finally gets back to war trace, reopens the business. He has a second son, Don, yeah, we all know. And he worked for some years doing that. It turned out it's hard to make a living when you're making perfect furniture. Perfection is expensive, that's the saying in the book. And so he took a job, AEDC, Arnold's engineering. And there you go, thank you. Doing wind tunnel work, making tiny little bitty models of things where 1/1000th of an inch tolerance would make a difference. Incredible. He ended up late 50s, opened the shop again. Don was around by that time. And Don Gallagher, from the very first, from the very beginning, was always told that he took after his dad. He hung out with his dad. I know you've heard that your whole life. And from your mama, that's where I learned it from. He takes just after J.W. Early 60s, I think we're in 62, 63. Solar music in Shelbyville. A gentleman approached J.W. and asked if he would make them some cheap guitars, and that's what Shelby guitars were. Can you throw together some guitars? Well, from that point, that was the first guitars. And Don and J.W. took that project on together, because as gifted as J.W. was, he didn't know nothing about building a guitar. So he's a very practical person. He bought 2 cheap guitars and they soldered them right in that. See how these things are put together, reverse engineered. did a couple of years of building Shelby guitars. Mr. Sam McGee, as a matter of fact, Mr. Sam McGee was, endorsed those instruments. But so probably some of you in this room remember Mr. Sam. Steve and I had the honor of seeing him, I think it was 1971 at the Athens Fitness Convention. Really amazing, seminal, iconic musician. And there's still Shelby's around, which is a testament to their durability. They're not bad guitars. And that's what J.W. figured out. If I can use plywood and use sloppy by his definition, then maybe if I use really good tone woods and optimized it, I can compete, or I can compete with the finest guitars that have ever been made. And I want to point out that it takes some audacity to think that you can be one person in Wartrash, Tennessee, and you can compete with Martin and Gibson, among others, because there's very few things that have greater fan loyalty and brand loyalty than them Martin and them Gibson people. Steve and I grew up with that. The gentleman from Solar Music, as a matter of fact, never doubted J.W.'s ability to build a good guitar, but he said it's not going to work because nobody knows your name. And J.W.'s answer, perfect, was I figured my name was as good as anybody else's. And it was. 1965, middle of May of 65, J.W.'s 50, he built the first G50 guitar, Gallagher G, 50 years old. Don, by that time, already had the skill set to build his own guitar, start to finish, and to do it to his dad's very serious standards. That's a D17 Don for 17 years old. 1966, they started selling guitars. They sold 28 guitars that first year in 66. If I'm not mistaken, there are 2 of them here in this room right now, if I'm not mistaken, from 66. They sold 68 in 1967, so almost triple their output. It was working. And then kaboom, guess what happened in 1968? It was a very good year, says Don Gallagher. It was a very good year. 98 serial numbers, 96 guitars. I have one of them right over here I'm going to share with you here in a little bit. But 68001 was Old Hoss. Nobody knew it at the time. Don Gallagher messed up on that body. He sanded it a little too thin. Doc could have had a perfect guitar, you know, and he messed it up. And because of that guaranteed perfect stuff, that guitar was never meant to be sold. It was never meant to get out at all. And that's the guitar that, of course, in 68 that we're talking about, that the famous iconic meeting between J.W. and Doc took place. And Doc didn't care about the scratch. It's barely noticeable. I've seen the guitar. It's been much more made of it than you'd think. But I want to point out there's a bunch of different versions in that story, but it all focuses on J.W. and Doc meeting and talking and this deal taking place out on in Union Grove, North Carolina. It didn't quite work that way. It was actually in Deep Camp the next day. And I would suggest to you that it had not been for Merle Watson and Don Gallagher, 2 really young guys that are friendly and easygoing, hadn't been for them 2 doing some talking, it's very possible that they had never made it through the gauntlet to Doc, much less in his house, and the rest of this to have happened. So give Merle credit, you know, where it's due there. 98 went to Grandpa Jones. His wife Ramona bought it to him. Has anybody in here seen Grandpa Jones in concert? I have. Man, what a great performer, great musician. He always called his wife Ramona. I have no idea why, but it was just funny, and so he did it apparently all the time. Ramona bought him a very fine guitar. Don, they didn't live in Nashville. It was a drive. Okay. On Christmas Eve, they made, Don and his dad made the trip to Grandpa Jones's house to give him that guitar. But those weren't the first celebrity Gallagher guitar was actually to Peter Garrell, Peter, Paul, and Mary fame. Interesting story, he ordered a 70S, a modified version, rosewood guitar. Don and J.W. built him 2, one out of Brazilian and one out of Indian. He picked the Indian, and starting from that point, there were no standard model Brazilian rosewood models made. There's obviously been made since, but not standard model. So we're at 1968 here, and I have a guitar that is 68013. I want to show this guitar off. This is the first G45 that was ever made, proud to say. Now there were 15 G40s before it, so I don't want to take too much credit for it. But this is a beautiful, beautiful guitar. There's even some strap figure to it. And if you don't realize that, all I'm doing is just flat mat. There's some of this stuff that almost looks like the sapphire. Beautiful instrument. It's actually ivory, ivory nut and saddle. The little red dot inlays here, courtesy of 21-year-old Don Gallagher. There's your work right there, buddy. And I want to play you a song on this guitar, and I'll give away the plot line here. There were 4 guitars that Doc Watson played that were Gallagher's, not counting borrowing Merle's a lot, because he liked that cutaway. But this is 12 serial numbers away from Old Halls. It was in the shop at the same time. It's a G45, not a 50, but that's cosmetic. It's not structural. It's exactly the same rosewood here, not ebony yet. So I want you to hear what a 1968 G45 sounds like. I won't play the song. Don't sound too bad. Ooh, wait a minute, I'm nervous. I don't need to be. Oh, learn from Jim Hurst. Do this, guys. Do this. If you don't do it, you will pop a bursa here like I did on one of them big halls, wide necks, and you'll pay for it for years. So follow the advice of guitar players over the age of 50 and 60. Thank you. I'm not accustomed to playing outside my own bedroom. It's like my hands shake, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to handle that. That's a Bonaparte's Retreat, and I did that song first because I learned that from Merle Watson, like a lot of us did. He fingerpicked that. And I also threw in a little classical ditty that's not really folk music, and if you don't get that joke, you ain't listened to enough Doc Watson. But Merle was a Halls buddy. When we get to the Doc Watson model, it was Merle that brought Doc's Les Paul all the way down for J.W. to see it. Merle Watson bought 9 Gallagher guitars and played them extremely well. Merle was one of the most gifted musicians of a generation, and the only reason more people don't know it is because he was such a character that he shunned promotion. He spent all of his career trying to make his daddy look good. He did it really well. People that like Jim And Don, who knows his music, we don't make that mistake. We know what a Hall's Merle was. He was really, really something. But just remember that tone. Hopefully I'll be able to actually play something confidently before the day is out. Or it may take a glass of wine. But we're in 68 now. Well, I forgot to mention that in 67, guess what? As it was about to take off, Don Gallagher got drafted too. He was allowed to work through 68, and this incredible year where it just all took off, the rocket ship took off. But guess what? 69, Mr. Don was gone. Now he left with a stockpile. He left his dad with a stockpile of bodies, and Don gets credit for building the bodies. He don't seem to get credit for much else, but I've got a theory I figured out just a couple of nights ago, and I can tell this because Don would never tell it. He's never even thought of it because he's way too modest. But they sold almost 100 guitars. His last year, that 68 when he was there, almost 100 guitars working full speed. It's not just the two of them. They got a whole team working around them. Don leaves with the bodies already in place, and production went down to 27 guitars. Meaning, I'm no math major, but it means the output of that shop went down 75% because Don walked out the door. And it wasn't because of the bodies, because he'd already done that. It suggests the at least remote possibility that Don Gallagher in 1968 was doing 3/4 of all the productive work in that shop. And I don't know any other explanation.
I've never thought of it.
And he's too modest. He would never thought of it. But it goes to show you, he wasn't just building bodies, and that's usually the dividing line. Don built the bodies, J.W. did the finish work. They forget Robert Reed carved the necks. They forget that there's a bunch of people there working on this. And I got a shocker for you people. There's not one person that sits in a shop and builds a guitar. It takes a bunch of people to do it. If you're planning on making more than a handful a year, you've got to work together. And but that's my theory, is that Don was doing a lot more of that work than he gives himself credit for, or than anybody else would. Now, J.W. recouped pretty well. He kind of doubled the next year. It's really like production started over when Don left, and it wasn't until 1970, 71, when he was over 100 guitars again. J.W. managed to pull it off, and he was too successful, frankly. He had more orders than he could ever do. I know for a fact that by the time you were getting into the mid-70s, he was a year and a half behind on orders, at least. I know Don Potter waited a year and a half for his guitar. There's a lot of people that just show up at these shops and expect you to drop what you're doing and take you on a long tour and take you to lunch. Sorry, like me and Steve did to Don 25 times. But a lot of people did that. They did it to J.W. There's paperwork, there's marketing, there's a lot of work to do. He got overwhelmed, and he had only planned to work for 10 years anyway. And so he was going to retire. In 1975, kind of fate had it written in the cards that Gallagher Guitars was going to end in mid-1975 with about 800 guitars. And Don Gallagher, who had already gotten a bachelor's degree in business, a master's degree in psychology, and working on a PhD, working with autistic and developmentally disabled kids, wouldn't he have been a good one? Man, we stole him away from all those unfortunate children, and he used to work with all of us messed up people instead. So, but Don, and don't forget this, if he hadn't gone to Jean and she said, oh yeah, we're just going to change our plans that we've worked for years towards, no, let's just go home to War Trace and have an unconventional lifestyle. Well, and I'm going to support my husband doing this unconventional work. Sound familiar, Arena? Yeah, sound familiar? Yeah. We're going to let him be crazy and see how this works. And boy, did it work. Because you talk about, I mean, you look at the ledger, 1975 and 76 are kind of impressive and scary both. Don was building batches of G70s, 10 at a time. 10 G70s at a time. He caught up, and those next 12 years or so, up until 87, were the most productive years of all of the Gallagher guitars. He was acing it. I want to emphasize that before J.W. left in '74, he did a bunch of things. He built the first 71 Special in '71. That was easy to remember. He did a first of a lot of models. But Doc Watson wanted a Doc Watson model guitar. And it was around this same time that tone woods were already beginning to get rarer and more expensive. Oh, and I should have pointed out, if you show Don Gallagher that '68 guitar, he looks at it, and he, like a luthier, he has to look down the neck at it. You know, he has to. Okay. And he'll strum on it when big old hands in, and he'll go, look at this, pattern grade Honduran mahogany. Those were the days. And he was serious about this. It was readily available. It was relatively inexpensive. It doesn't exist anymore. And by the mid-'70s, it was already not existing. J.W. and Doc collaborated and came up with a Doc Watson model. And if you'll hand me that fine guitar right there, I'll show off and try to compare and contrast for you what happened between old Hoss and the Doc Watson. And wow, time is flying by. For starters, we have really beautiful wood. African mahogany, it's called. Not really accurate. Sapele would be the more proper term, because there's a bunch of mahoganies and a bunch of African woods that have nothing to do with the Honduran mahogany. It's still, we still got that wonderful ivory there that was up until 1990 when the African elephant was declared endangered. If Don Gallagher's handed this guitar, he has to do the routine. You know, he has to do it. But he will go, look at that top. And I want you to know, this is the finest grain top I've ever seen on anything. This is Sitka spruce. And I put a magnifying glass and a ruler on it last week night, and I counted 50 lines in 1 inch, a 50th of an inch. You can look at the 1/16 marks, and there'll be 3 perfect little lines there in the 16th of an inch. For those of you who don't know, this piece of wood used to be a minimum 300-year-old tree. Minimum 300 years. Grown in perfect climate conditions that were consistent over several centuries. And I want you to know that doesn't exist anymore, and it's not going to exist. So you're talking about finest tops and finest materials available. He made other changes. He wanted the neck there as a 1 11/16. He wanted a little wider, 1 3/4, a little friendlier for most flat pickers. He got these big, wide, fat jumbo frets on it. And he wanted a narrower neck profile to match his Les Paul, of all things, his Les Paul. So this one's kind of ironic because it's a 1 7/8 inch Les Paul neck, which is really kind of twists my brain to even think about that, you know. But did I leave anything out, Steve? You know, beautiful, striped. Forgive me for the flubs I'm going to do on this. 1 7/8 inch. I can testify that when you miss a string by a 1/16 of an inch, it actually matters. And I'm going to miss a bunch of them because I'm just not used to this. But this is, if you're wanting a JW guitar, then this is a JW guitar, and this is a result of collaboration between him and Doc Watson. And same string, same pick, same picker. And it's a bigger guitar. It also weighs about a pound more, it feels like. So this is a twin to Doc's. Imagine Doc picking this up. homework on that song, Windy and Warm, before I presented it here. I want you to know the Ventures do a version of that song, Surf, Windy and Warm. It's just marvelous. But I must have found 15 people that do that song other than Doc Watson. And I think my favorite one out of them all is this kind of obscure group called David Grisman Trio. And there's been a bunch of David Grisman Trios through the years, but the one with Jim Hurst in it doing that song is just absolutely nails it. It's great fun to be in the company of and to be able to enjoy such great musicians. So where was I? In 1975, Don has rescued, and G, has rescued this company. A lot of sacrifice. Don also doesn't think about that. He's not going to complain about that. You bring it up and say, oh, it was my blessing, it was my pleasure. What Miss Hazel said is that it was a blessing that he came and that he did a great job. And he did for a really, really long period of time. But, so maybe it's a good time to say it. There's this concept, David Mathis knows this story well. When J.W. retired, he was such a mechanical genius that there were certainly people that questioned whether Don could do that. Well, Don proved that he could, and it was really into the early 90s, frankly, before he changed things. There was no reason to. He was loyal to the original designs, original techniques, original materials, all of that stuff. He proved that he could do it. And it really wasn't until the 90s when the technology started catching up in lutherie that Don began making changes. Always, because how do you improve perfection? I mean, that 68, I mean, Old Hoss was a perfect instrument. I play it more than the rest of these, by the way. It's the plain Jane simple one. It's the one I play all the time. And if you had to play in front of a microphone all the time or record, it might well be the one you would use, because it is clean, it is precise, it is simple, if that makes any sense to you guys. It does to Jim, because he had to go out and buy a cheap dead guitar to be able to get on the stage and play. I was in a garage band once, and a guy with a bass on 10 and drums and everything. I took a Gallagher in there, and I knew before I even started that this is not going to work, because my guitar was vibrating so much that it was not playable. As a matter of fact, these guitars right here are so alive that Steve can have one in his hands over there, and I can talk, and he can feel my voice vibrating in that guitar. They are alive, buddy. And so how do you improve perfection? Well, J.W. took us to here. Don came in and took us to here, which is Doc Watson's third guitar, which came in 1991. And the way I look at it, I'm going to play it in a little bit, but this guitar is actually real similar to these other two, real similar. And it's a testament that not a lot had changed. There was nothing dramatic in the way they were being changed, because you had perfect already. People are going to get mad at you if you change something. So if you're looking for a J.W. guitar, you're ignoring the fact that Don was there in the very beginning. Don built that body, did a bunch of the work, did 3/4 of the work in building that guitar. So that's not a J.W. guitar. And even long after J.W. was gone, what you're really talking about is a guitar that J.W. laid his hands on himself. And how much does that really matter? Because I guarantee you get that brand new David Mathis's newest Doc Watson model over here, and it's got J.W. Gallagher all over it. It is a J.W. guitar, just like this one is. And so it's all really artificial. Don doesn't get enough credit for the work he did in those first few years, but Buddy, he tore it up there for 12 years, from 75 to 87. We have both been blessed with multiple guitars from that time frame. Now, everything was going great. I keep mentioning 1987. Here's a story, if you don't know it, that will paint a picture of who Don Gallagher is. In 1987, Sherwin-Williams lacquer began to deteriorate and crack on scores and scores of Gallagher guitars. And since they have this guaranteed perfect motto, Don Gallagher was faced with a disaster, and Don Gallagher closed the shop, refused to take any more orders. He refinished untold numbers of guitars. He sat there in that shop many hours a day breathing fumes. Not a good way to go, you know, to yourself. Not a good way to treat yourself, Don. But he, anyway, it took 5 years, roughly, and 500 guitars not being built. And Don honored his lifetime warranty of workmanship and perfection of Gallagher guitars. And it sealed anyone that had any question about it, about Don's ability and his level of ethics. Don was again faced with this, okay, I got 2 ways to go here. Here's this more profitable one, and the one that would be far easier on me emotionally and financially, but no, I'm going to do the integrity deal. I'm going to go this way. Thank you, Don. I'm glad you did. And thank you, Gene, because if Gene hadn't been there making a living for them 5 years, I'm not joking about this. This is serious business. Saved the business again because it could have easily ended in 1987 with 2,000 guitars. Best story of it all from that sad time. Doc Watson calls up Don Gallagher and says, hey, I wore out my Doc Watson model I knew, and I need another one, buddy. And Don said, nope. He did. He turned down Doc Watson. This band had the gall to turn down Doc Watson after all he'd done for you, Don. Now, Doc had a personality and he had a temper. I know him well enough to know that. Doc Watson was not happy with that. But Doc Watson was another person of integrity. That's why I like J.W. so much. I think they were both perfectionistic and they both were filled with integrity. They appreciated their friends and their families. And so where am I? Where am I going with this? Lost train of thought. Oh, in 1991, when Don had finally finished, he doesn't know how many, too depressing to count, too depressing to know, doesn't matter, I did it, it's done. 1991, Don started building guitars again, and he built a Doc Watson, he's one of the first ones, a new guitar. And Doc must have been pretty forgiving about the whole thing because that's the guitar, like this one, 93, that Doc named Donald. And we had heard him speak to Donald. Come on, son, he'd say, sing to me, boy. At Merlefest on stage, he would talk to Donald. All the time, he never did a set hardly without mentioning Donald. So I think Doc forgave Don because he understood what was at play here just the way you do now. So this is my first guitar that I bought from Don Gallagher. I was at Merlefest, April of 1993. The same month he learned about the fake Japanese Gallagher guitars. The very same month, as it turns out, I met Don for the first time and decided I wanted a guitar just like the one Doc was playing, and I got one just like it. It's a crazy guitar. Emphasize again, this one sounds very, very reminiscent all the way back 25 years further to 1968. Great recording, microphoning guitar, easy to play. He liked that cutaway. By the way, Merle was the first one that ordered a cutaway. That was in the mid-70s as well. When J.W. was building the first Doc Watson model, Merle ordered 2 of them. Most people don't know that at the same time. They got their first 2 together same day with a cutaway so we could play slide on it. Doc enjoyed that cutaway so much that when he finally talked Don into making him another guitar, one without a crack in it this time, Don, then he built him a guitar like this. And if you collect Doc Watson memorabilia like I did forever, that Fret's magazine cover, the acoustic musician cover, the 3 Pickers cover, you just keep going. Other albums, multiples of them, have that, the Donald guitar on it. So there was some, whoa, I'm so sorry, so sorry. There was a world-class amount of music played on this guitar. I'm not going to play another Doc Watson song. I want to try to tease this history of the instrument, history of the people, with the history of the players, you know, that play these guitars, and I'm going to get way out of sync here, but arguably my favorite artist in any genre of all time is Claire Lynch. I just can't even begin to tell you how much I love her. I told her that one time. That's how I met her. She did. It was bad. My daughters told me all day not to do it. It was backstage at Motel. Daddy, you can't do it. Please don't embarrass us. Well, I was bound and determined. I walked up to Claire Lynch, complete total stranger, and said, Claire, my name's David Tipton. I love you. Two things. She grabbed her belly and bent over double laughing. And she said, well, I love you too, David. And did it work? Well, Jim might like this story. About 2 years later, I'd seen him 3 or 4 times by that time, and spoke to her every time. And I went up to her one day and said, you know, I tried to go see you in Huntsville recently, and they were sold out. I didn't get to go. And she said, David, if that ever happens again, call me. She wrote down her phone number and handed it to David. I couldn't believe it. It's still in my wallet right now. It is. So girls, don't worry about embarrassing yourself. I got her phone number. So after listening to Claire, and I shared this with Jim, because Jim's the guitar player on most of the stuff I was listening to, and in all those concerts I went to, I came to Claire Lynch through Jim instead of the other way around. But after listening to Claire and Jim for about 10 years, more days than not, and every time I was in the car, a song kind of popped out of my head. So this is an original song, and it is dedicated to Claire, and the name of it is Dance with Claire, and see how you like it. Doc Watson model, Cutaway, 1993. maybe. I always channel Claire whenever I play that. I close my eyes and I can see her butt dancing on stage. If you've never heard Claire Lynch, you ain't lived, buddy. She's really something. And I've stopped gushing on Claire and tell you again, I pointed out several times, this is very, very similar to the other two guitars I played in the way they play, the way they sound. This is a Doc Watson model. It has the cutaways bone instead of ivory. Everything else is pretty much the same, and buddy, it's a Hoss. This thing's been played a lot. Great guitar, and you know, we ain't got the bluegrass police here today, so you know, you can play all kind of music on the Doc Watson model. It's easy to play, even for people like me. Doc made it easier for himself by setting things up. You get a guitar that's built properly and set up properly. You get that intonation back, and it makes you a better player the easier it is to play. So if you're newer to it, don't buy that $50 harmony guitar that Mama bought me. Oh, I did it again. You know, get the best guitar you can and one that's easy to play, and it will pay off for you. But that was the beginning of almost 30 years ago now, Don. I don't know how that happened. It seems like a day and a half or so. But 30 years ago, I met Don Gallagher, and this guitar was delivered to me. Or I went to Wartrade and got that guitar, and I guess it was December of that year. I got lost on the way, and it was like way late, like 2 hours late. It was dark, and Don, of course he did, he stayed. He was there at the shop. Of course he was going to wait there. He didn't have supper. You know, he's going to wait for the stranger from Alabama to find his way there. And his brother Bill was there too. And so that kind of shows you how that worked. You know, nice, really nice folks. And Bill made a comment, I still remember that, oh, when you was coming, you had this to come after. Yeah, well, of course. I'm dead on the side of the road or I'm on the way, one of the two, you know. So where are we? All right, we got the early 90s. A lot of really fun things happened. And I'm not going to go into any detail over the fake Japanese guitars. Was it Shunda Tokai, something, who knows. They were the 93 group that were marketing Doc Watson's picture and saying Gallagher's aren't being made in Tennessee anymore, etc. It's a wonderful 30-minute story that gets Walter Mondale involved, the ambassador to Japan. Wonderful story. I have learned, when I wrote the book, I knew of two. Aria did the same thing. I knew of two Japanese companies that did that. And since the book came out, I've learned there were at least 3 others. And Don, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but if you go on eBay right now, this minute, there are 12 fake Gallaghers for sale. And there's 2 real ones. One, it kind of easy way to differentiate is the fake ones are all about $1,500 and less. And an old G50 that's beat up is $3,500. So that'll be a hint. Be careful of a bargain you get out of it, know what you're getting into, because there's a massive number of these fakes. Massive numbers of them. And some of them will have a $5,000 price tag, you know, and shipping from Japan, you know. So that's a sad story that people would copy and have a lack of integrity of people that actually do have integrity. But there's another big part of the story, and I'm almost at the end here somehow, is that Don keeps up with the science of building a guitar, and there were just some things that were learned by that point, including doing UV finishes, which was this savior for finishing forever for about 10 years, and then all of a sudden it wasn't the savior after all, unfortunately. That's a big deal. But a CNC router came into the game in 1995. Don didn't use it to increase production, he did it to increase the accuracy of the pieces that go in there. You can make a piece more proficiently, more accurate, more, you know, greater tolerance to things. It also let him start doing inlay work and create absolutely the most beautiful Gallagher guitars, if not guitars ever, that I've ever seen. Steve liked the Trail of Tears. I was always partial to the Dogwoods, but that Magnolia guitar, it's like a vine-looking thing that actually continues from the fretboard around the rosette. That would be the one, Don. I know it was a favorite of yours.
It is. It absolutely is.
Just an amazing, amazing instrument. So there were great things that were obvious, and with the cosmetic work and all, there was some really amazing, fun things happening through the 90s and into the 2000s. But I want to hit on just a couple of things that some of you probably know but may not appreciate. A flat top guitar is not flat. It's actually got an arc to it, an arch, a radius, front and back. So flat top is a misnomer. If you have an optimum tone means liveliness of the top, and having that arch just right will increase the liveliness of the top. And Don did that. He also incidentally redid every single form in the shop during this period of time, which makes a difference. When you use something 3,000 times, it wears. It's made out of wood. He redid all that. He changed the technique of attaching the top to that inner liner and the size, because that's a really critical juncture having to do with sound. Made an imperceptible angle change in the bridge pin. And I'm sure there's other things where you can talk about the Purple Heart. And so there were a bunch of things that don't sound really sexy, you know? They're just not something to get excited about. But I've got something to show you guys. And I have a bunch of Gallaghers. I don't say it to brag. I'm just really, really proud of them. I had a cutting contest in my house. We had auditions just to see who got to come today and see Papa Don. This joker right here was not staying home. I could not believe it. I could not believe what happened. Now, this guitar, unlike those other three, these have the new improved techniques involved here. It's still that beautiful, beautiful sapele, and you can't see it from where you are, I'm sure, but come look at it. This is the wildest, flamiest maple bindings here, that you'll ever see on a guitar. This is an extraordinarily beautiful, beautiful instrument. An amazing top, too. It's got Doc Watson's autograph on it. That's from that CNC router, just like this is. And I've owned this guitar for a while, and I'm ashamed to say I don't play it enough, but I'm going to after this one, because I want you to just, with those sounds you have in your ear back from these first three perfect guitars, I want you to see what Don Gallagher did to a Doc Watson model. And if this ain't the star of your show, I don't know who you are. Thank Jim Hurst for this too. I played this song forever, and I took a course with him online during COVID, and it inspired me to like think and work instead of just relax and dream on and play the same 20 songs. But we'll see how this goes. By the way, yeah, this is a different animal, buddy, right here. Charles Kerr, Steve's dad, enjoyed it, that music's far too important to leave it just to professionals. And I've always liked that. I'm an amateur, but nobody loves it more than me, and I just do it for myself. You know, it's not a competition, guys. It's something that enriches my life every single day. And we're getting at the very end. I want to close by saying we are thrilled and honored to be here. I want to point out teamwork again. JW did amazing things because Miss Hazel, whose spirit is all around us, Miss Hazel and Don made it happen. Don did amazing things because Miss Hazel, Gene, and his dad made it happen. The Doc Watson family, they adopted each other. They made it happen. And now we have an extended family. I'm not a Gallagher either, David, but I'm a proud extended member of this family. And Steve and I can testify that our lives have been enriched many, many times over by knowing you, Don, and Gene, many times over. And last thing I'm going to say is your mother, when we interviewed her for this book, I said she was proud of you. She said that, and you were a blessing to her. She said that you were a really nice guy, and people like you. So, yeah. That he's loyal to his friends, to his family, and to his community, and she just thought you were great, and she was just absolutely right. There's one last gift I want to give you, Don. From the time you were a little boy, you've been told all your life that you were like your daddy, that you took after your daddy. I want to suggest you took after your mother. Absolutely every bit as much, and thank goodness it turned out that way. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your attention. You're welcome to play these wonderful guitars. Come up and ask us a question I may not know, but I've had to read the book again because I'd forgotten so much of it. But it's a great honor and a thrill to be here among friends, and I'm really looking forward to the music. We got Jim Hurst. We got Steve Kaufman. We've got the Gordons here. If you don't know the Gordons, man, they're just lovely, amazing people. And I almost forgot, Steve. You let me down. That's his fault. There's an old adage that only nice people play Gallagher guitars. That's not allowed otherwise. And if you mess up and sell one to a mean person, then they will turn into a nice person if they play it enough. So, thank you.
What a special day, right? I mean, that was fabulous. Thank you so much, David. All right, we're going to have a little bit of a break. It's time for a couple of trivia questions. Okay, see if anyone knows this one. Someone in here does, so don't give it away. Give it a little time. Do you know who wears a Gallagher tattoo?
David. You.
No. Steve Kerr. There you go, Steve. Now let's see it. All right. I had a few of these. I'll just do one more. This has already been hinted at. You may know it. Which guitar was Merle Watson's first guitar? What model? It's close. G40. And when we saw Karen at Merlefest, this past Merlefest, she brought that guitar to us. It's needing some work, so we have it back there. I've not seen another Gallagher like it. Don, I talked to you about that. And it's got some purfling on the back, just a different guitar, tortoiseshell binding. So it's different. This is a G40 up here, by the way, that Chuck came in. He came in with a case. I may have already told this. I'll tell it again. Hi, Ray. show the case? Well, the case is a story in itself. But he comes in with this old case, and I think, oh, that's going to be an old one. It's, is it six? No, it's 46601. Is that the right? 56601, which means January 1966 is the fourth guitar. And so we're all oohing and awing over it, you know. And then Chuck says, well, I brought it for you. Wow. So he gifted it to Gallagher. How about that? Okay, then next, we've got some merchandise giveaway. So I've got a few areas to ask about, and you can pick out a cap, a mug, a shirt. What else do we have? I think that's about it. So, tattoos. That's down the street. Tattoos down the street. Okay, who came from the furthest distance? Do we have any nominations? How many miles? Okay, David, I'm sorry. I think 1,200. Anybody can beat 1,200? No, that's pretty good. New Orleans, but not 1,200.
Shelbyville.
Okay, no.
6 blocks.
All right, so be sure to pick out something, okay? Who's the newest Gallagher guitar owner that's present today? I think I know who it is, but I'm not sure. We have a couple possibilities. It may be
Sooner than February 2022?
Thomas. Do you remember your date? Or Richard.
2/19. So February 19th.
And Richard?
Hello?
Yeah, I think Richard's got it. Oh, hello. What?
What, you remember when you got yours? I can look it up.
No, Richard got after yours.
Okay.
All right, Richard's the new Gallagher guitar owner.
I got to play his when I came.
Yes, there you go. See, yeah. Sam is sneaky. Sam is sneaky.
We'll talk, yeah.
Who owns the lowest serial number? I think we know who that is. Yeah, that's here. You may not have to have your guitar here if you know serial number. But I'm looking at. Oh, you're right.
Lower than Chuck's?
Okay,
Chuck is 66.
but yours is 66. Is that right?
No, that's
68. Ray Markram. Anyone
Chuck is 66.
older than 67?
Chuck brought the 66.
Yeah, he doesn't own it anymore. I think he needs merchandise. Yeah. But so does Ray. Okay. And then, who owns the most Gallagher guitars? I think I know who that is.
11.
11. Okay. You're my hero. Yeah. All right. That's super fun. Well, good grief. What a day. What a day. So I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. I want to say something about Austin, and Ben was here. I think he's left. Okay. So Austin, you're the representative of all the luthiers here at Gallagher. And we have put together a team that I'm very proud of. And everyone has grown over these past, we're into our 3rd year now, to become more skilled in their craft. But everyone's been dedicated from the beginning. But in terms of gelling as a team, I see that really happening, and this is going to be a really good year for us. I also want to express appreciation to Captain Sam, 6 blocks away, who has loved music all of his life. There's stories after stories about your connection to music and to Doc and Merlefest. Sam's gone down with us the past 2 years to help us at Merlefest. He's never met a stranger, and he makes friends like nothing, you know. So he's great to be a part of things. And I wouldn't be here today as part of Gallagher if it weren't for Ray Markham. And that's because of, I don't know, 13 years old, I don't know. Ray was our youth director and started teaching me guitar, and he owned that 1967 G50. So I knew about Gallagher from the beginning. I grew up fairly close to Ward Trace too. So, but probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that introduction. So that's really special too, that you're here. I want to express my thanks for all the encouragement and support that I get. Don, I really meant to print out some of the emails. I get so many emails of appreciation that we're continuing your work, and specifically, you know, talking about your work. I appreciate everyone who's bought guitars and supported us financially and supported the luthiers by doing that we're keeping this craft going and this history. It continues, and I've had some discussion with Don about this, it continues to deepen my understanding and appreciation of this history. Fairly recently, you know, it dawned on me, every Gallagher dreadnought that's ever been built has been bent on that green machine back there. And we have forms to bend other shapes, but every dreadnought, my 99 G50, your G50, 1967, everyone's been bent on that same machine, and we keep it going. Pretty special. But I really want to express appreciation to Don and Jean, because they've welcomed us in and embraced us. And Raina and Jean, you know, they just chatter on and talk and like best friends. You guys have just been wonderful to us, and we appreciate that. The first time Don came to the shop, we scurried around and cleaned up. Man, it looked great. And he comes in and goes, "Where's all the dust?" He didn't think we were working. So we didn't clean up so much today. But it's an honor to continue what you and your dad started. And most importantly, I want to express appreciation to Raina. Like Jean was being talked about, she's been right there with me through everything. She cares about the shop. She cares about the guys. She cares that you send in your registration card so she can file it. Please do that. But she's just a wonderful partner, and this wouldn't be going on if it wasn't for her. So thank you, Raina. So in just a moment, I'm going to hand the mic off to Don. I'm going to get you set up here in the chair, and I'll get you set up. And he's going to share some remarks with us, and then Don and I are going to have then we're going to share some discussion, and then we're going to take maybe a few questions, and then we're going to hand it off to Jim Hurst to close out the afternoon. So let's welcome Don Gallagher.
How's that? Can you hear me okay? I tell you, ever hear the expression, feel like a teaspoon following a steam shovel? But that's kind of how I feel. Dr. Tipton, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I mean, thank you so much. The book that he and Steve Kerr wrote about the history of Gallagher guitars, it's really just amazing. the amount of work that he went into going through the records and the detail within that book is so impressive. I guess anybody that would take a magnifying glass and put it down on the top of the guitar and measure the number of, it's compulsive.
Fair enough.
But thank you. I'm not like Dr. Tipton. I don't have that great memory, so I put a guideline on a note card to keep me on track. Because Dean said if I didn't, I'd go wandering off into all kinds of tells and things. The main thing that I want to do this afternoon is just to express my appreciation. First of all, to Gene and to our family. Because Gene and I both feel like we have really been blessed in our lives. We've got 3 wonderful boys, 11 grandchildren that are just a joy to be around. All 3 of the boys had a little to do with the guitar business. Stephen, our middle son, is the one that's more artistically inclined, and he considered, carrying on the business. He made some beautiful guitars, and had that expression of artistic ability in them that made them kind of special in and of his own right. But he decided to go a different way, and I respect that. My dream wasn't his dream. But I'm so proud of him and each of my boys for what they've done, because they're doing wonderful. And I have to say, because of that, I can't express to David how much appreciation I have for him, for continuing on this tradition and this legacy that was started really, as David Tipton says, back in 1939. Because my father's objective wasn't just to make furniture, I don't think. It wasn't just to make guitars. It was to express excellence in woodworking. And that's what he did in everything that he did. And in automobile restoration, He loved working on his cars and doing those things. So thank you, David, and thank you, David, for what you've done to preserve that legacy and what you are doing to preserve it in the future and carrying it forward. I just can't tell you how much that means to me. It just means everything. I didn't know it does to Gene, too. Because when you put your life work into something, you'd like to see it go forward. And to me, and I think Gene can attest to this, it was never a business. It was a lifestyle. It's just what we did, It was just a way of living that was part of our lives. You couldn't really separate that from who we were, really. When David asked me to say a few words, the thought that came to my mind was thankful. Thankful for my own personal family and how we have been blessed. Thankful for David and his family and what they're doing. And thankful for each one of you and who you represent in terms of people who have been supportive of the business, people who have purchased guitars, have played them, have given those words of encouragement along the way. You know how important it is to occasionally get a pat on the back and say, job well done. I know David has just come back from Merle Fest. I told David, Merle Fest was one of those places like Winfield. It was such an ego builder. I mean, I could be getting burnt out, and you go to Merle Fest, and it's such a positive, uplifting experience. It just has to re-energize your batteries, and you want to go home and do even better because of the positive response you get from people. So thank you for what you've done, each of you, and for those whom you represent, who, it's amazing to me. I've been getting emails from people from France and Japan and all over, thanking me for this day or congratulating me on this day. To think that Dad started something in the little town of Wartrace. And he had a very basic philosophy. He said, if you make something good, word of mouth will spread it, and you get something going in a certain direction, you kind of lose control over it. It takes on a life of its own. And that's really what's happened to the guitars. You know, I can't think offhand. Do you know, Dr. Tipton, how many different countries we've shipped guitars to? I wrote that down once upon a time.
But it's a bunch.
It is a bunch. And every state, the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, and I know France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Japan, Israel. I mean, they've gone all over the world. Germany, you know. And we've had people from all over the world come to War Trace to pick up a guitar, you know. And that is so gratifying to know that you're doing something that people appreciate. And that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you going. But of all the people I could be thankful for, of the one person who has done the most outside of the family for Gallagher Guitars, you know who that is. It's Doc Watson. Doc Watson, and not just Doc Watson, but Merle and Rosalie and Richard and Nancy and Karen, their family. You know, there have been, over time, a number of well-known artists that have played Gallagher guitars. As Dr. Tipton mentioned, the first really big name was Peter Yarrow, Peter, Paul, and Mary. And Peter had sent tickets down to my dad and I to bring a couple of guitars to meet him at the Municipal Auditorium in Atlanta. Because he wanted, he'd been talking about Gallagher guitars and wanted to buy one. And like David mentioned, we made two up, one Brazilian, one East India Rosewood. There's several things I remember about that journey, but one of the more fun things was Mary had packed a picnic lunch, fried chicken. And so after the concert, we went out on the street outside of the Municipal Auditorium and had fried chicken and wine with Peter, Paul, and Mary. And as a token, I kept that wine bottle. I thought it was pretty neat. And it's still in our house, somewhere. Oh yeah, it's empty. But that's what it's been so meaningful to me for the business, because it's not a business really about wood as much as it is about relationships with people, you know. And Doc Watson and our family is kind of like the ultimate relationship. You think of Segovia, you may think of Ramirez as a classical guitar that he's identified with. Or Chet Atkins with the Gretsch, or the Gibson signature models that he endorsed. Or Les Paul, of course, with Gibson and the Les Paul model. And then Doc Watson with the Doc Watson model. But there is a difference. And that difference is a personal difference. It's that personal relationship that my family had with the Watson family that really made it special. You know, Dr. Tipton mentioned I took off from college, the 67, 68 college year. It was to help Dad, because I'd worked with him in the summers. I'd been working at the shop ever since I can remember, really. And when I was in the 7th and 8th grade, I'd learned how to do a lacquer finish, and I was doing lacquer finishes on furniture. And when Dad went to work for Solar Music in the spring, I was hired, I think finishing my sophomore year in high school, and my job was to put the lacquer finish on those Shelby guitars and to teach somebody else how to do a lacquer finish before I went back to school. So that had always been kind of a part of me. And Dad started the business in May of '65, and 67, 68 school year, I was taken off. I was going to help him, and as Dr. Tipton said, that's a pivotal year in the history of Gallagher Guitars. It really is. And it's funny how things just by fate happen. Not, you know, we didn't plan things to happen, they just do. In the spring, I I don't know how many of you may remember the Folklore magazine. Folk music was really big in the early 60s in this publication, and I like to read it. And I saw this ad, Union Grove Fiddlers Convention. And we had never been to a music festival before. Union Grove started in 1924. And by 1968, it was a pretty big deal. So I suggested to Dad, maybe it'd be a good idea that we could take some of our guitars and go to Union Grove and display them. And he thought that was a pretty good idea. You know, Dad loved cars. He loved kind of exotic cars. He had a 1960 black Imperial with red interior. That's one of those things with the huge fins on the back. But he had traded that not long before this and got a 98 Oldsmobile, another pretty hefty car. And so we headed out to Union Grove in the 98 O's. Had, I think, maybe 3 guitars in the back. As Dr. Tipton said, we had one mahogany guitar. That was a G50. It was the one I'd cracked the side on. Dad had fixed it. And he had said when we left, we're not going to sell this guitar because it has a defect in it, dummy. You know, we're not going to let it go. We got to Union Grove. It's not like Merle Fest is today, not with the expo tent and craft area. There was this big field out there where people just parked. And so we just found a parking place, opened the trunk of the car, and set out our guitars. And, you know, people would come by and talk to them and show them the guitar. On Saturday, got a little testy. On Saturday, it was raining some. It became kind of muddy. We closed up shop. There wasn't much you could do sitting out there in the mud field. And that evening, we were just wandering around the festival ground. There was this huge tent where they were having the band contests that were going on. You know, it's funny how things stick in your mind. That must have been the year Beverly Hillbillies came out, because every band there was playing Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And I remember I went to bed that night. I told Dad, I can't sleep. All I can hear is Foggy Mountain Breakdown going on. So, but we were out kind of wandering around, just kind of aimlessly taking everything in that Saturday evening, going through the mud. To make things even more exciting, a contingency of Hell's Angels had come motorcycling in. And aside from all the bluegrass music, there were a few fights breaking out here and there. And Dad's caught a couple of guys playing music. His ear heard them under a tree. And there was just some people standing around watching. So we just wandered over to see what was going on. And it was Doc and Merle. And they had just come by. They weren't part of the performance. They weren't on schedule or anything. They had just dropped by to do a little picking under a tree. Picked a great time to do it, too, you know, in the middle of rain and mud and all the things going on. And so we walked up to him, and Dad introduced himself to Merle. And Merle's response to our surprise was, "Oh, yes. I've heard about your all's guitars." And then we had a little conversation, and Merle says, why don't you all come by the house tomorrow on your way home? And we said, great, we'd love to. And we stopped by on Sunday, and, you know, Doc and Rosalie were always so gracious. And here these guys were, not just us, but other people who had making that pilgrimage to Doc's home, tracking mud into their house. Never said a word about it, you know. We sat and we talked. And after a while, Doc says, I'd like to take a look at those guitars Merle said you've got. So we pulled out the guitars, and he played on them a little bit. And he said, Merle, come in here. I want you to hear these guitars. So Merle came in. And you know how things just stick in your mind. And Doc was playing on one, and he says, you've got real ivory on the nut and saddle on this guitar, don't you? And Dad goes, yeah. How do you know that? You know, and he said, well, I can tell by the way the strings slide across it. And so then he proceeds to say, well, you know, I really like this mahogany guitar. Can I get it? And Dad says, no. I'm not the only one that told Doc no. He said, no, Don cracked the side on it and it's not for sale. And Doc says, well, you know, Chuck, I can't see the crack anyhow. It's the sound that I'm interested in, and I like the sound of this guitar. And so Dad said, he kind of got him there, you know. Dad said, well, I tell you, if you really like that guitar, I'll let you have it. No strings attached, except the ones on the darn thing. If you'll promise, if you get tired of playing it, you'll give it back to us. And Doc said, that's a deal. And that was the beginning of this lifelong relationship, really, between the Gallaghers and the Watsons. And Doc, you know, played that guitar. He told me once at Winfield when I was visiting with him backstage, I don't remember what year that was, but at that point in time, he said he'd used that guitar on every recording for Flying Fish except one record, for one song. That has been his go-to guitar. And Doc remembered, because Doc has an amazing memory. Just had an amazing memory. And when Dad and Doc got together and made the first Doc Watson model, Dad took it to Bean Blossom. And Doc was playing up there, he and Merle, to deliver it to Doc. And I don't know, maybe a couple of months later, we're working in the shop, and here comes the UPS driver in with the box. And what's that? Open it up. It was Doc's G50, the first guitar, all lost. So I called Doc. He said, well, your father said, if it stopped playing it, give it back. And I've got this new Doc Watson model now. I don't need it anymore, so he gave it back. Makes sense. And when he gave that guitar back to us, he left a strap on it, a leather strap that said Doc Watson. And we just had it sitting in the shop. And Wanda Johnson, who was at that point in time the curator of the Country Music Hall of Fame, came in. And she saw it. And she said, is that Doc's guitar? They said, yeah. And she said, you think we could get that to display at the Country Music Hall of Fame? And my father said, well, you know, it's okay with me, but, you know, let me call Doc and see if it's okay with him. So he called Doc, and kind of classic Doc answer. Well, I guess so, son, but it's a waste of a mighty fine guitar. So we let them display for a number of years there. See, I'm already off track, Gene. This isn't what I'm going to talk about. But I was visiting with Doc at Winfield backstage. We were talking, and he kind of got on my case. He said, now, Don, this was like years later. He said, now, Don, somebody had gone through the Country Music Hall of Fame and said, my strap is not on my guitar. I said, oh, I didn't know that. He said, it's not. And he said, I want you to remember something, Don. It's your guitar. It's yours. Don't you dare let somebody walk out of that place with it. So I want you to go get it. I said, okay. So we went and got it and displayed it there at the shop for a number of years. Just backtracking a little bit. Doc got that first guitar. Later on, at the latter part of the summer of '68, Doc calls the shop and says, Merle's been talking about wanting a Gallagher guitar. And they were going to play at East Tennessee State University in the fall. I'm not sure if it was September, October, somewhere along in there. So he was wondering if we could bring up a couple of guitars to let Merle look at. And Dad, of course, is sure. me and Jean. This is before Jean and I got married, so she goes way back to the very beginning and then some. And my mother and dad drove up to East Tennessee State University, where Doc and Merle were doing a concert. And backstage, you know, we were visiting with them, and Merle looked at the two guitars, and one was like a nice G70, kind of dressed up, and then that old plain Jane G40. And Merle says, 40, this is the one I like. I love the sound of this guitar. So Dad said, it's yours. You can have it, son. That's fine. You know, of all the years that we made guitars, we had never given a guitar to anybody, even Peter Yarrow. I will tell you when, I probably shouldn't say this, but we went there. And Peter had sent us tickets to come. And we had taken those two guitars, a Brazilian rosewood and an East Indian rosewood, because we were making guitars out of both East Indian and Brazilian rosewood. And it was before the embargo had come on and you could get either wood easily. But it was confusing when somebody called and wanted a guitar, and Dad said, well, would you like it out of Brazilian or East India? The answer today would be obvious. But in 1968, it was like, well, I don't know, what do you think's better? You know? So Dad said, we need to make it simple. And whichever guitar that Peter picks, we'll start using that wood. And he picked the East India rosewood guitar. And then he did the unforgivable. He said, now, Mr. Gallagher, Fender has offered me, I think it was $10,000 to play one of their guitars. What are you going to offer me? But I could tell when somebody gets under my father's skin. And he goes, well, Peter, that guitar sells for $300, and it works like this. You give me $300, and I give you the guitar. Well, he ended up getting the guitar. We had our picnic lunch, and it was all good. But I say that, it was years later, and Dr. Tipton will appreciate this. But Clara Lynch had played a G65 for years, and we had become friends. And just like Mr. Hurst back there, who'd played a Gallagher guitar for years, since what, 87, I think, and Chris Jones, who had played a Gallagher guitar, an old G70 for a long time. Those are three people, because of what they had done for us, how they had established that. We felt like, I felt like his dad was gone. That I needed to give them a guitar just to show our appreciation for what they had done to represent our business, you know. We didn't give them a guitar so they could go out and promote the guitar for us. We gave them the guitar to thank them for what they had already done for us. And there's a difference. And one reason I had that attitude, I've seen people, craftsmen, give some artists a guitar and they not really appreciate it. And my philosophy is, if you don't pay for it, if you aren't willing to pay for it, why should I give it to you? If you don't appreciate it enough, to at least buy it at a discount, maybe. You know, if you got to put some skin in the game, or you know, forget it. You know, it's just a matter of principle, really. So anyhow, Merle got his first G40, and he played that guitar for years. I was tickled to see Karen bring the guitar to show David at Merle Fest. After he had that guitar, I'm not sure, it's early 80s, I guess. Merle came by the shop one day and had that guitar with him. And he said, Don, I love this guitar, but I'm afraid something might happen to it, so I want you to build me a new guitar. He said, this guitar, and this is his expression, has been around the world about 3 times. And it sounds wonderful. And there's no way I can recapture that sound, so I want to use this guitar strictly for recording purposes. I want you to make me a new guitar that I can take out on the road. I said, absolutely. What really precipitated that, Merle said? They were doing a set someplace. And when they got through with their performance, somebody was carrying Merle's guitar by the neck out the back door. And they were walking down some steps, and somebody had thrown up on the steps. And the guy carrying Merle's guitar stepped on it. His feet slid out from under him, and Merle said the guitar went flying through the air. Fortunately, somebody caught it. And he said, that was too close. I'm not taking any more changes. This one is staying at home, using it for recording sessions, and making a new one, so we did. When my father retired, he had a goal to work 10 years to make 1,000 guitars. He actually retired a little before the 1,000th guitar. But when we finished up number 1,000, and I still have that guitar, because that was basically a gift from me to him, marking that changeover, that passing of the torch. I'm sorry, David, I don't have a guitar to give you. Pass the torch. But number 1001 went to Rosalie. Went to Rosalie because Rosalie could play, and Dad wanted to do something to let her know how much we appreciated her and the whole family. And then Karen's husband, Karen Watson's husband, I bought a G70 from me at some point in time. I was at Merle Fest one year and having breakfast with Doc. And Doc got to talking about how Richard was playing his daddy's guitar. And he wasn't too happy with that, because he was afraid somebody might steal it, something might happen to it. And so later on that day, I saw Richard and I said, Richard, your granddaddy says, he's a little worried about you playing your daddy's guitar. He's afraid something might happen to it. He said, that's right. I said, Richard, would you like for me to make you a guitar? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, all you gotta do is ask. What do you want? You know? Well, there's no way we could repay the Watson family for what they meant to the Gallagher family. So it was that special relationship that we had between them. You know, Doc was always loyal, as Dr. Tipton said. He was a man of integrity. And he was always loyal to the brand. You know, among guitar makers, there's like friendly competition, really. It is friendly. I've had good relationships with the Martin people, with Richard Hoover at Santa Cruz, Bill Collins, all those guys. It's kind of like a network of friends. Dr. Tipton mentioned about the lacquer problem. You know, I was on the phone talking to Mr. Arntz, the head of the finishing department at Martin, trying to figure out what are we going to do with this. And on the phone to Bob Taylor, you know, how are we going to handle this? Because it wasn't just my problem. How I dealt with it was my way, but the problem was everybody's problem that was using Sherwin-Williams lacquer at that time, because EPA had mandated a change in the formulation to make it more environmentally friendly, and when they did, they messed up the elasticity of the lacquer. That's T70C10 was the code. I had used that lacquer since I was 15 years old, so it was a bummer. In '87 they changed it. But anyhow, now I need Steve Kerr to tell me what do I say next.
Hey, Don, tell them what Martin Guitars did with the same problem of refinishing, the hundreds that they had. Same lacquer, same problem. How did Martin?
Well, I hate, they just said they weren't responsible for what Sherwin-Williams had done. They were not honor that. It was Sherwin-Williams. You know, I don't want to say too much. But everybody had their own way of dealing with it. Everybody had their own way of dealing with it. Well, I will say this. I mean, Bob Taylor was started using a product called Fuller Plast, which was a highly toxic material, but it made a good finish. And at one conversation I had with Mr. Arntz at Martin, you know, we're talking about alternatives, because there were the water-based lacquer. We used some of that. I wasn't happy with that. You know, when you've had something really good, it's hard to find something to replace it. And so I asked him about, well, what about Bob Taylor, that Fullerplast? Do you know anything about that? And he said, yeah, Don, I do. He says, me and a couple of guys flew out to California to check it out because we heard it was real good. He said, to be honest with you, the only person in that whole factory that was safe was the guy spraying the lacquer that had an oxygen mask on. He said the women sitting in the office, you could breathe it, and if you can breathe it, it's getting in your lungs, and son, it's not worth dying for, which is right. So, okay, Steve, where am I? This is why I made notes. Okay, talking about Doc's loyalty to the company, and talking about the friendship among guitar builders. Doc had been playing a D18 up until he got his Gallagher guitar. And it was about a year before he really started playing it a lot. Part of that, I think, is giving time for the guitar to break in. Part of it was, I think, a typical country mountain boy's suspicion. Who are these people, you know? Let's see what the truth of the matter is before I really go out on a limb saying, you know, and use this guitar all the time. So it was about a year when he really started playing. When he really started playing it a lot, it caught not just some people's attention, it caught Martin Guitar's attention. And Mike Longworth, who was a very good friend of the family and became even a better friend of the family. In fact, when he passed away, they asked me to do his funeral service. And I was honored to do that because he was that close of a friend of the family. But Martin Guitar dispatched Mike Longworth to Deep Gap, North Carolina with a D45 Martin, great choice, to persuade Doc to start playing that guitar instead of his Gallagher. I say great choice because, you know, what all the pearl work on it didn't mean anything to Doc. You know. And Doc graciously declined the offer. And then Mike came on and spent the weekend at my parents' house. Nothing was said about that except Doc mentioned it later on. But I say that because it wasn't anything to take offense by, from my perspective. I mean, it was this friendly competition. And, you know, I have to tell you this one story about Mike. The first time Mike Longworth, I don't know, Mike is the guy who wrote the book on Martin guitars. And maybe, Dr. Tipton, what you've done with your book is what happened with Mr. Longworth and his book. When he wrote that definitive book about Martin guitars and he went through all the production records and he codified everything, that turned old Martin guitars into vintage guitars because now you had a history about the guitar. And what you've done is given a history and a legacy to Gallagher guitars. So it's transforming them from just an old guitar to a vintage collectible guitar, I think. So anyhow, Mike comes to visit. And for years, when he took vacation from Mike Martin, he'd come down to visit Mom and Dad, and then later me and Jean. The first time he was there, if you've ever been to Wartrace, you know it's a railroad town, right? The house where my mom and dad lived had been in the family since 1905, still in the family. And it's not, what, 50 yards from the back bedroom to the railroad track, if that much. And Dad, very graciously, offered Mom and his bedroom to Mike, the back bedroom next to the railroad track. And they went to the front bedroom. Mike didn't know there was a railroad track out there. And about 11 o'clock at night, when the freight train from Nashville to Chattanooga came roaring through, woke Mike up. he jumped out of bed. He had no idea what was happening, and he went running to the front of the house because he thought the whole back end of the house was about to go. And he told me, he said, I got to the front of the house, I could hear your father laughing in the front bedroom, and I knew I'd been had. I have to tell you this, too. I'm sorry, Gene. What time? One of my favorite stories about Mike and my father. In 1978 was the first time that we made a guitar as one of the prizes for Winfield, for National Guitar Championships. And again, I said friendly competition because the promoters of the festival had decided they'd been given Stu Mossman's guitars for the prizes, but they decided in 1978 they were going to have an instrument selection committee select what they considered to be the 3 best guitars in the country to buy. And they were going to buy them so there wouldn't be any undue political competition, as it were. Well, obviously Stu Mossman was going to be one of them because he was the one instrumental people in the festival. Martin Guitar is the second logical choice because of their history and everything. And so Robert Redford calls Martin Guitar Company, speaks to Mike Longworth. Who would you recommend for our 3rd guitar? And Mike says, I'd recommend Gallagher Guitars. They make an excellent guitar. Well, so Mr. Redford called me at the shop and wanted to know if I would be willing to make a guitar, and it had to be within a certain price range. Well, you know, we're just kind of country people. I'm trying to remember exactly what the price range was. Martin was giving a D28. Whatever the price was for that D28, it was about the same as our 72 Special, one with the pearl border on it, a lot fancier guitar. I said, well, yes, sir, that price would be a 72 Special. And he said, okay, we'll take it. So, and then to even add spice to the story, Steve Kaufman here, not yet, okay. But Steve was going to be in the contest that year in 1978. And he had just come by the shop. That's the first time we met Steve Kaufman. He came by the shop, and in the course of the conversation, him seeing the shop, showed him the guitar. This is the guitar we're making for Winfield. Had the body together, doing the pearl inlay work on it. And he said, well, you know, I'm going to enter that contest. And so Dad and I said, well, what size neck would you like on the guitar? He said, well, 1 3/4 would be nice. It'd be great, we'll put a 1 3/4 neck on this guitar. Well, there's 2 things about that. That was the first and only year Mom and Dad went to Winfield, Kansas. Steve Kaufman won the guitar contest. And he told me, like, he knew what he was going to get. And he had a custom-made guitar right there just for him, right? He said, so they take him into this room where they have the guitars sitting up and they can play on each one of them. He just kind of walked down. I'll take this one. Martin wasn't too happy with that. I don't know if I should say they wouldn't sell, but they didn't sell a guitar to Winfield the next year. They were a little... Kind of the funny part about that too, Dad and Mike were setting up in the bleachers. And Mike goes to my father, just look around here. What you see is Martin guitar, Martin guitar, Martin guitar. Every now and then you'll see a Gallagher. My father's reply, I know exactly what you mean. You can drive down the road and you'll say Chevrolet, Chevrolet. Every now and then you'll see a Rolls Royce. So, Doc had that loyalty to the brand. He kind of turned down the fancy Martin. You know, I imagine I'm like most of you. I was always a little like awe in the presence of Doc. I mean, he was an impressive person. His skill, his talent, his graciousness, all combined to make, I mean, I was intimidated by him. I mean, I really was. I always felt so humbled to be in his presence. And, you know, how you and I recognize people by their facial characteristics. Doc obviously couldn't do that. He recognized people by the tones of their voices. And I could call Doc up, and as soon as I opened my mouth, he said, "Don, how you doing?" I wouldn't have to tell him who I was. I could see him someplace, even in a crowd, and if I spoke to him, he'd recognize my voice. When I would go to Merle Fest, Doc would usually come by the booth and play and visit a while. And at some point during the weekend, I try to make a point to get backstage, you know, and go visit Doc and maybe other people and hang out a little bit. This one particular time, I went back to visit Doc and kind of tapped on his dressing room door. Doc says, "Come in." And I walked in the room, and he immediately says, "Just sit down over there and don't say a word." I sat down and didn't open my mouth. He was sitting there with Charles Welch, and they were going over his set. And Doc had to memorize everything. He was not only memorizing the sequence of songs that they were going to be doing, but this was like a jam session. And Charles was saying, "Okay, now Bella Fleck is going to be here, and so-and-so is going to be here on this side, and over here is going to be so-and-so." And Doc knew who all was going to be on that stage with them, and where they were going to be sitting, and what, you know, the order of the songs they were going to be doing, and everything. And when they got through, I just couldn't keep my mouth shut any longer. I said, "Doc, that sounds like a pretty good set." He had a kind of funny look on his face. He said, "Don, I thought you were my grandson. I would have never talked to you like that." But you know how you get impressions of people, you know, first impressions. You know, Doc's impression of somebody was by their voice. And one time, Gene and I were up at Doc's house and visiting, and Rosalie said, "Well, I've got some tuna fish. Would you all like a tuna fish sandwich?" And Gene can attest to it. I love tuna fish sandwiches, so that was right up my alley. And so we went to the kitchen and sat down, and Rosalie made us tuna fish sandwiches, and we were eating the sandwiches, and I don't know exactly what was said, but something was said that was kind of funny. And Doc laughed, and he reached over, and he's put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, "Well, Don, you're a big fella." And Rosalie goes, "Well, yeah, Doc, he's every bit as Merle." And Doc goes, "Well, you always talk so soft. I thought you were a little fella." Well, you know, I guess one of the ultimate, to me, compliments that Doc gave us at the end of his career, the Chamber of North Carolina, Boone, North Carolina, was going to put a statue up of Doc playing a guitar on the street corner where he used to play for tips in his young days. And Doc instructed the sculpture. He says, "I want that guitar to be a Gallagher Doc Watson model cutaway, and I want you to call Don. I want him to give you all the specifications of that guitar and pictures. I want it exactly like the real thing." And so the sculpture did, and I sent him dimensions and everything, so it would be, you know, an exact copy of the last guitar that I made for Doc, the Doc Watson signature cutaway. So when we were at the dedication of the statue, I said something to Doc about, Doc, I really appreciate you, you know, having that guitar, that model made with you playing it in the statue, because that just kind of seals that relationship for eternity in a way. You kind of looked, I said, Don, would I want anything else? But you know, Doc did play other guitars too. I mean, Wayne Henderson, who's a good friend, who's an excellent guitar builder, and he and Doc became friends, and Doc played, in fact at that dedication, he played half the dedication using Wayne's guitar and half of it using his Gallagher guitar. And this is one of those other things I probably shouldn't say. It's not, but I'm going to open my mouth anyhow and say it. Yeah, you know, if I get in trouble, I'm in trouble. So be it. But one year at Merle Fest, because Dana Bourgeois, who's a very nice fellow, but he'd been wanting, you know, to get Doc to play one of his guitars. So that year at Merle Fest, I had arranged for Ricky Skaggs presented Doc a Bourgeois guitar. And Doc liked the guitar. It was a nice guitar, and he played that guitar quite a bit after that, along with his Gallagher. But the funny part about it was Richard was kind of offended by it. And Richard comes up to me and says, Don, isn't bourgeois French for pig? That's right. And the next day, Doc came by and he was telling me about it. He said, "Don't, son, I'm always going to be playing with Gallagher, but you know." And we didn't have any kind of formal agreement with Doc. You know, it was just a friendship thing, really. And I will say there's one other thing in terms of his loyalty and our relationship. Another good friend, Richard Hoover, is Santa Cruz Guitars, and they make really good guitars. He was trying to sell guitars to Mandolin Brothers, to get a deal worked out with the Mandolin Brothers. And Mandolin Brothers in New York, and they told him, well, if you could get Doc Watson to endorse this guitar, we'd carry it for you. And so he made this guitar and took it to Doc. And wanted Doc's permission to call it like a Doc Watson Santa Cruz. And Doc told him, he said, well, you'll have to get Don Gallagher's permission for that. And so Richard gave me a call. It was a little, I could tell he was a little nervous about this. You know, he called me and he says, you know, he explained the situation to me, and he said, I've already given Doc a guitar, but he said I'd have to have your permission if I wanted to call it a Santa Cruz Doc Watson model. And what do you think I said? Okay, that's right. I said, Richard, that's fine. If it'll help you, you go ahead and do that. Because, you know, to me, I told him, I said, you know, Doc's going to play whatever he wants to play. And if that will help you, it's fine with me, you know. And that's the kind of spirit, at least back in them their days, there was between guitar makers. So I would share anything with anybody, and I think vice versa. Even the first time, and really the only time, my father and I went to Martin Guitar Company in 1969. Went up there for a visit, and we had taken a guitar with us. And Mr. CF, who was 75, seemed like an old person then. But 75 doesn't seem too old right now. Yeah, he was about 75 years old. Frank was kind of running things then, and Mr. CF was so gracious. We had the guitar with us, and he, oh, let me look at it, you know. like Dr. Tipton says, you know, he looks at it like a Luther looks at it, you know. And he said, I got one suggestion for you. The neck, when it joins the body, does that look like the body is straight across there? It is. It looks like that, but it's actually an optical illusion, because we made the neck block at that point in time straight. And with this neck coming down, it makes it look like the body's caving in right there. And Mr. Seoff said, if you'll just round that neck block a little bit, it'll make it look straight. And we did, and it does. It looks a lot better. So, I'm not saying we were doing industrial spying or anything, but in 1969, Frank was wanting to come out with reissue the herringbone guitar, the D28 herringbone. And Mr. Seoff was saying, not a good idea, because the way the braces were voiced, it weakened the top too much. And too many of those guitars, he said, came back with bellies in them, you know, where the top had bellied up because of the tension of the strings. And he said it was kind of a financial disaster. Of course, the ones that survived, go mortgage your house to buy one, you know. They're premium vintage guitars. And so Mr. Seoff was saying to Frank, nope, we're not going to do it, because if we came out with exactly the same guitar, it would be a disaster, because that's what it was before. If we change it, beef it up, and we call it a D28 with a herringbone, we're not being totally honest, because it's not the same as the old ones. We've changed it. And so, you know, later they did come out with a HD28. They just changed the nomenclature a little bit, but they did beef it up. There was a gentleman there, I think it was from Sweden, doing research on stress analysis of the tops and the bracing locations and all like that. And he determined that when you scalloped or voiced those diagonal braces, that's what was weakening the top too much and causing those old guitars to belly up. But we didn't have any connection with the past. You know, it didn't hurt us. So from that conversation, really, we changed our bracing just slightly. We scalloped with the X brace, but the two diagonals we cut on a straight taper. Now, as Dr. Tipton pointed out, Dad went to aircraft mechanic school, and he worked on airplanes in World War II. And that's really where that idea came from, because in the struts of an airplane, you want the same thing that you want in the top of the guitar. Maximum strength with minimum weight. And the struts of an airplane have straight tapers in them. And so that's how we came up basically with that idea of making those tone bars straight tapers to give it maximum strength with minimum weight. So, you know, we're just picking up a little bit here and there as we went along and tried to modify and develop the design. I think I've already expended my time, haven't I? I've got another half a note card here. I ain't gonna touch on, David. No, I think I do need to close. I will just say, that relationship with Doc is so special because, in part, Dad was probably Doc's biggest fan. And for years, each time Doc and Merle and T. Michael would come and play at Exit In, we had to go. We had to take them out to dinner. Shouldn't say the word had to, because we loved it. Take them out to dinner, and we'd visit them, you know, at dinner, and then maybe at intermission. Talking about the presence of Doc. I mean, he had a star quality presence about him. If you were in his presence, you just had, he had an aura about him. I just got to tell this couple of stories here. One, we had gone to the Exit Inn and gone out to eat with Doc. The group that was preceding Doc was an all-girls band called the Buffalo Girls, and they were really good. And they had this fiddle player, and she was just burning it up. And there was this guy in the audience who obviously had a little too much enjoyment, and he was going, "Play that thing, honey. You're the best it ever was, sweetie." And it was getting on her nerves. You know, it was really bothering her. So at intermission, we're sitting back there with Doc, and this girl tells Doc, "What's happening?" And Doc says, "Okay, don't worry about it." And so when Doc and Merle go out for their set, they're playing along, and this guy goes, "Play it, Doc!" And he stops. T. Michael stops. Merle stops. There's like dead silence. Just sit there for a minute. And he says, "That's okay, son. I remember the first time I had a beer, too." And everybody broke up laughing, and then they just started playing. God didn't say another thing. One more quick story then. And I tell these stories just to try to convey to you the essence of that kind of relationship that we had with Doc, you know? Because it wasn't a business relationship. It was a personal relationship. And one year at Winfield, they had asked me to have a panel discussion about guitar making and instrument repair. And it was me, Mike Longworth, John Pierce, Charlie Huffman, and Stu Mossman. And we were on, I think it's stage 4 in the barn, you know, room. And we were having this discussion about different aspects of building guitars and swapping tales about strange and bizarre instrument repair things that we had done. I remember Mike Longworth talking about one of the strangest he did. Some guy was playing a Martin guitar in a bar, and somebody pulled a gun and shot at the guy, and it hit the brakes, diverted the bullet, saved his life. So Martin guitar can save your life. Anyhow, yeah. So we had a respectable crowd in there. And about halfway through the session, all at once, all these people start coming in. I mean, they were almost like literally hanging from the rafters. I'm going, what in the world? Has the word got out that we're such dynamic speakers up here or something? I don't know what's happening. Come to find out, Doc was doing a set that overlapped that. So about halfway through our discussion about guitar building, his set ended. And as he left the stage, he says, "My friend Don Gallagher's over there talking about building guitars on stage 4. I think I'm going to go listen to him a bit." That's all it took. He had a real presence about him. So I thank you for your time. David, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing in caring for this guitar legacy. And, you know, you talk about the Gallagher Guitar Club. It's really Gallagher Guitar family. I mean, it really is. And it takes a family to make this work. Like Dr. Tipson said, you can't operate in a void and make it work. It takes everybody working together, the artists, the craftsmen. You've got a good crew of people. You know, we were always blessed to have some excellent craftspeople that worked with us and for us, who did excellent work. And so thank you all. I appreciate it.
Man, this has been really good for me. I appreciate this so much, and everybody's been blessed by you being here and sharing this with us today. we're going to hand off to Jim Hurst, who's another part of the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And early on, you told me you should talk to Jim Hurst.
Yes.
And so I did reach out to Jim. Jim recently told me you had already reached out to Jim, said this man's going to be calling
I
you.
prepped him for you.
Yes, thank you very much. But Jim was so gracious and threw his support behind us immediately. A couple of things I want to say in response to what you said. I had a wonderful discussion with Richard Hoover, and he told me about that.
Really?
And it's all true. And the appreciation and respect and the way you handled that continues to today. The other thing, when we were at Merlefest last time, Karen did bring that guitar. When she brought the guitar, Mason Baya, who's the newest member of Old Crow Medicine Show, and Mason is the same age as the existence of the band. He's 23. So he doesn't have an extensive history, even though he's from North Carolina, that Ketch does with Doc Watson. Because, as Ketch said, if it hadn't been for Doc Watson discovering them that summer and inviting them to Merlefest, it would have been a band that would have petered out at the end of that summer, and instead it's here 23 years later. So they have an appreciation for Gallagher because of the connection with Doc. And the G70 hanging back there, they used that on a recording, their last CD. And Ketch saw our new jumbo, and it's a flashy one, or at least one version's flashy, and Ketch is a flashy guy. So he called and asked if he could trade that in to the G70 on the jumbo, so I couldn't say no to that. And then at Merlefest, they wanted a Doc Watson model because they were playing Merlefest this year. And so we built a Doc Watson, had it done in time for them, and they invited me on stage to present it to them. So Karen comes by with Merle's guitar, and Mason is there. And got to meet Karen, got to play Merle's guitar, and then later that night got presented the Doc Watson model. So you talk about the circle kind of being completed. We were really happy about continuing that. And the younger generation of people that are still learning about Doc and learning about Gallagher guitars too. So Merlefest was really special to us. But again, thank you so much for being here and being part of this and what you shared with us. And we're going to hand it off to Jim next.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
I think this is great. What do you all think? You know, I've been a Gallagher player since '87. I play other brands of guitars too, but my go-to guitar is my Gallagher. My Doc Watson is the one that stays home except for going to the studio or down here. My Jim Hurst models, I got two of them. The number one model that Don made for me, and he gave me his thank you for being a Gallagher player. That stays at home too, except for the studio or here. My number two I brought with me, and I'll use that here tonight. But, you know, while Don was talking, while Dr. David and what David Mathis was saying, we are a family, you know. There are other great builders of guitars, no doubt. But you don't find many that are like a smaller builder, like maybe, you know, the Gallagher family. We got people like Doc Watson and folks that play them and have kind of helped to raise awareness to the quality of the instruments that JW and Don was making. But what is remarkable to me is that the quality of the instrument was what Doc was looking for, because I think, this is my own personal opinion, I never got a chance to talk to Doc about this, But as a player, I need an instrument that allows me to reveal what musicality that I can do through the instrument. I don't need an instrument that holds me back. I don't want an instrument that colorizes what I do or limits what the development of the sound is. When I played that Doc Watson Gallagher, that Fred Schumann at Durdell's Music in Toledo, Ohio, called Don and said, there's a gentleman up here that wants a Doc Watson guitar, and he says, we don't have enough quality-oriented players up here to be able to buy 3 guitars. Would you let me buy 1 guitar for this gentleman? And Don said he would. So that right there shows to me that he wasn't sticking to the 3 guitar dealer order. He said, sure, we'll let you do that. So he sent that Doc. And he ordered it in '86, and the guitar was built in '86. I got it in February of '87. And before I played that guitar, I played every other dreadnought hanging on the wall. And there was Martins up there, there was a Mossman up there. I don't remember all the other ones, there might have been a Taylor. I played all of those, and I kind of put it through my paces and felt what I felt, didn't feel what I didn't feel. I put that Gallagher in my hands, and all of a sudden, oh! Seriously, the guitar allowed me to play like I wanted to, and the music came out of the guitar. I wasn't having to push the guitar. I wasn't having to decide how I was going to change my playing in order to let the guitar do what it needed to do. The Gallagher just naturally did it. As David was playing these up here, which, by the way, great work, David. They just sound amazing. You just rake the string, you rake your pick across the strings. They sound amazing. Now there are other guitars that do that too. But I have to say, in my personal opinion, a Gallagher guitar will make the player a better player. You get a fine quality instrument like my Doc Watson or these here, or all the ones that you guys have that you love so dearly. They're put together with a lot of thought, a lot of understanding of the techniques and all of, all the ins and outs of the stressors and, the lightweight and support. But if you put all that together, along with care and concern and a desire to do it the best you can on every guitar, then you get a family like this that have guitars that they wouldn't part with for nothing. And I think we're all in agreement with that. We all have some of us have older guitars than others. Some of us have custom order ones. Some of them we just bought one from here. We got one from a store. We bought one online or whatever. But when you play your guitar, it makes you the player you are. And the more you play it, the more it'll be a better player tomorrow than you was yesterday. Next year than last year. Because that's what it does for our playability. So I've met a lot of players that because I played my Gallagher Doc Watson, the first time I played, I think I said this yesterday, but the first time I played the Grand Ole Opry with Claire Lynch, Holly Dunn, I played that Doc Watson that I got from Don. And I played it all over the place. I played it most places in the States, in Canada, I played it in Alaska, I played it in Japan, I played it on cruise ships, I played it in Europe. That's the one that went with me, Radio City Music Hall. I played it, it was my buddy. But then when the crack happened in the back with Claire Lynch, I said, I'm not playing that on the road anymore. So I ended up playing some other things for a little while. But that Gallagher was my buddy. That's what, so people identified Chris Jones and Claire Lynch and myself and Don Potter, some different people playing Gallagher, and the Gallagher name signified somewhat a level of quality that people started saying, well, what about those Gallagher guitars? Kind of the same thing with Stu Mossman, when Mossman was building some guitars. They were fine, So now we know which one of us are Gallagher owners. We see each other in the street. We go, hey man, how's your Gallagher? How's your G50? How's your Doc Watson? And it's a camaraderie, And I've run on to people who've won guitars in contests, Winfield or Merle Fest or wherever, maybe they bought it at Merle Fest, maybe they won it in some other, I don't know how they got to it, but a couple of people wanted me to say thank you and howdy and congratulations for all the years that you've done this, Don. And Miss Jean, my wife has stood beside me. And if you don't think about it, you know, sometimes, I know you have talked to her and you guys talk, but that's a special part of this too. If it wasn't for her and Miss Hazel, I mean, it's again, family. And so thank you for your effort for Mr. Don too. Robert Schaefer said for me to tell you that he would love to have been here, but he can't. But I've got some videos for you. There's only 4 of them, but I think they'll be perfect for today. Robin Kessinger, Pat Kirtley, and I thought I had a list. I've been looking for my list, but there's about 10 of them that said to tell Don and Miss Jean and David and Raina, thank you for what they're doing, and that you just have a big support. You know, they all love Gallagher's and they love you guys. And you know, here's the thing: Don knows each one of these people, and I bet for a while you could probably call what year everybody's guitar was. You say, oh, you know, Claire Lynch's was a 78 or whatever, and Chris Jones is a 76, and mine was an 86. Well, he said 87 a while ago. It's exactly what it was. So, and you know, that's that. And David did it earlier. He was calling everybody's early guitars. That's that, and it's continuing. You know, Raina and David are now, and the Luthiers, Austin and everybody, they're doing this too. It's this connectivity, and it's really wonderful. I think it's something that you don't really think about until you're sitting here and you're listening to everybody and you're realizing all these people are connecting with me through Facebook and through my website, you know, email and everything. So I don't want to go too far because I know we've all been sitting here and I'm the least important one here. So David, can you mind if you can play the first video for me?
Don, it's been 39 years come this fall since I got my sweaty little palms on this jewel. It's a member of the family. Congratulations on your day.
Now, that's one of the finest guitar pickers from West Virginia right there. That's Robert Schaefer. And I told everybody, a short video, that's pretty short. But he's kind of like an understated gentleman anyway. That's a good sounding guitar right there. Go ahead and play the second one if you would, David.
1, 2, 3, 4. Pecan pie and western swing, Gallagher guitars and everything. So much music I gotta sing, that's what I like about the South. Hey folks, here I am, Kevin Russell here, Candy Gerard on the fiddle, sending you this message from the West Coast. It's time for us to celebrate Gallagher guitars. I've got mine right here, showing it off. It's the Jim Hurst model. I think I've got number 3 or number 4, Jim knows for sure. And I love this instrument, I love this guitar. I've loved it from the day I got it. And it's my favorite guitar. I've got a few, but this is my favorite. And I can't say enough about these amazing guitars. I play mine every day. I play it with pride. So I just want to say thank you to Don, thank you to Stephen, thank you to Jim Hurst, and thanks to everybody at Gallagher Guitars. You guys are the best.
Now, Kevin Russell's a guy from around Santa Rosa, California. I got to know him while playing with Claire. He had Claire Lynch and Front Porch String Band hired for the Sonoma County Festival at their annual festival, and Kevin was there as kind of the sound engineer or stage manager, if you will. And we just became friends over the years. And he played my guitar, he played my Doc Watson, he played my Jim Hurst model, he played Claire's, and he ended up getting a Jim Hurst model. So he's got number 3 out of, supposed to be 25. I think there was, 11 sold or something? I don't remember, doesn't matter. Maybe, yeah, probably so. But now that's one of the newer people that's on, he's the most recent Gallagher owner on these videos. The next 2 are probably royalty in the bluegrass world who play Gallagher way less than Doc, but they're both to me, kind of legendary Gallagher players, or have been. And if you see them on the road, or at least be with Chris for a long time, if you saw Chris Jones, he was playing his old Gallagher. Well, I think he got to where he told me, he says, I don't want to take it out anymore. And I think he maybe mentions this in this video, but this is Chris Jones, number 3 there, David.
Hi, Don. It has been such an honor and a privilege to get to play a Gallagher guitar my entire professional career, and it has also been such an honor and a privilege to get to know you and your family. Your friendship has meant so much to me through the years, and I look back so fondly on every single trip I ever took to War Trace to see you, and I'm wishing you all the best on this day. I'm going to sing you a song. You see the journey and the lines upon my face. No way to think that there's no master plan. When I look at where I started out and then at where I am, I'm a wanderer, I'm a pilgrim. I was made to move to the beat of my own drum, on my way to God's great kingdom. Grateful for the miles that I have come. Everyone I met along the way, in every place I rested at the end of every day, I always found some grace to lean upon, a word to give me comfort or a sign. I'm a wanderer, I'm a pilgrim. I was meant to move to the beat of my own drum, on my way to God's great kingdom. Grateful for the road ahead, grateful for the miles that I have come. When I meet my maker one fine day, all I'll have to offer, the one thing I can say, is that I had to see around every bend. I had to keep on going till I reach the highway's end. I'm a wanderer, I'm a pilgrim. I was made to move to the beat of my own drum, on my way to God's great kingdom. Grateful for the road ahead, grateful for the miles that I had come. hand, grateful for the miles that I have come. That I have come. Congratulations, Don.
And you know, I think Chris's sound was enriched by his Gallagher. That's what I'm saying. When you buy a Gallagher, you know when you get a Gallagher, you know the difference. You can feel the difference when you play yours. Am I right, guys? And so, if you play a cheaper guitar, I don't think you get that same kind of advancement in your playing ability. Your ear doesn't tune as well to what you're doing. You don't hear the separation of notes. You can't correct the mistakes that you make. I don't mean we're not going to have some mistakes here tonight, but I think he's one of those that when you hear Chris play that guitar, it sounds like Chris. That's Chris to me in a nutshell. We got one more video, and I appreciate your patience, guys. This lady has been somebody I've worked with for a long time, and she's been a Gallagher player for a pretty good while. And when she wasn't, there's extenuating circumstances that she will reveal here, which Don already knows. But anyway, this is Miss Claire Lynch, number 4.
Hey Don, I'm really sorry I can't be there with you guys today. I would say that I'm among the very most grateful of the Gallagher Guitar owners, and it's too bad I can't be there, but I just want to share a little bit of my Gallagher story with you. Here goes. I got my first Gallagher, a 1-year-old G65, which we now call the Old Gal, in 1982. I actually traded it for a so-so Martin D28 at the fret shop in Huntsville, Alabama. It had belonged to a lawyer, I believe, in Mentone. It may not have been suited to him, but it sure was to me. I played it for many of those early years. She was my go-to guitar, comfortable and suited to my hands. And as my career grew, people began to recognize it and associate it with your company. So I guess I was endorsing your brand before I even knew it. Then came one warm April day in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, when my former husband, in a fit of anger, smashed it while stealing a gig bag. We just had this amazing weekend, and I didn't even know about it until a couple days later when I opened the case at home. I tell you, when this guitar broke, it also broke something in me, my heart and my spirit, my happiness, and my marriage. We took it first to the late Marion Kirk, a fabulous banjo mandolin maker in our hometown, and he did what he could to patch it back together. But it wasn't until you reached out, having heard about the guitar's fate. You took it into your shop to work on it and found its voice again. It ended up heavier because of all the repair work, but my heart was so much lighter. Here's a picture of me years later upon my return to that same spot in the parking lot where the damage was done. My mother kept this photo on her dining room shelves for years because, to her, it was a token of triumph in my life. Now's my chance to thank you, Don, for your support, which strengthened my allegiance to the Gallagher brand so much that I ended up acquiring a second guitar, the G70 here, which I took on the road and wore out. This one rings like it has a reverb tank in it. Both, as you can see, are still in my collection, and they'll always hold a special place in the history of my career. Getting to know you and Jean and Stephen renewed my confidence and faith in the goodness of others. And where else but Wartrace could you find a man who was mayor, Baptist minister, and owner-operator of a world-class guitar company? Don Gallagher, you've been a friend to many of us, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you for all that you've done for the community of Gallagher guitar owners. Take care.
So in that case, the Gallagher guitar helped her to actually heal up from some personal issues as well. and you extended your extra work time to help her with that. And you've done that with a lot of things that you do. And I know enough about kind of things like this to know that there's a lot of things that goes on that we as owners don't see. There's a lot of things in back rooms and, you know, disasters in the finish shop or in the sanding or whatever that you guys deal with, and you don't ever say anything unless it just happens to come up in a conversation. So all of you luthiers, man, you guys do great work. Now all you guys back here, they've been doing some great work, and you can see them with the guitars that they've had here on display this weekend. So good job. And so from JW to Don to Stephen and Miss Jean and also Miss Hazel, now to David and Raina, and to the guys back in the shop and all the folks you've had working for you. It's a pleasure to be a member of this family, and I'm happy that this is going forth. So Don and Jean, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Oh, also Don, if you want those videos, they're on a little thumb drive. If you like, I'll give that to you. Yes, sir. Okay. I guess, you got anything, David?
Are we ready to wrap?
I think so.
Okay,
And any prize winners need to come over here and get whatever they need.
yeah,
Ronnie, you need to make some pictures of people sitting around so you know who I was here.
Okay.
oh, and Jean wants a picture again, right? So we're gonna do a group picture before we all separate. I want you to come tonight, grab somebody and bring them with you. We've got an exceptional opportunity to hear some wonderful music tonight. And the stories, Don, they were emotional to me, so I'm sure they were to you too. And that's because of the relationships you've built, and I've realized I've stepped into that, and I honor that and prize or feel a responsibility for it. I also have come to say that we build guitars, but we build happiness. Because of the happiness with all the turmoil going on in the world, to deliver a guitar to someone and the happiness they get from it. So, wonderful day. Thank you so much, Don. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tonight.